Thank you for listening to the Isn't That Legal podcast, a legal podcast for non-lawyers. I'm Steve Flores, and I'm a lawyer, and I know my stuff, but there are a lot of different areas of the law that I'm unfamiliar with. So on this podcast, we bring in lawyers from different areas to come in and talk about what they do in a way that's easy to understand. One thing that's important for all of us to remember is that laws change all the time, and that we elect the people that write those laws. So if there's something that's unfair or doesn't make sense to you, you should organize, get together with like-minded people, vote, and make sure that you hold your legislators accountable. Before we get started, it's important for you to understand that we're going to be talking about the law and how lawyers work, but we're doing it for entertainment purposes. We are not providing legal advice, and you should not rely on the discussions we have for legal advice. If you have a legal problem, it's really important for you to hire a lawyer to help you with that. On this episode of Isn't That Legal podcast, we're going to be talking about family law. Today I have my guest is my good friend Mauricio Morales, who is the founder of Tinajero Morales P.C. Okay. He focuses his practice on family law as well as a variety of other different laws. So, Mauricio, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Steve. Good to see you.
So I know Mauricio, we go way back, went to law school together and have been involved with a variety of different things for a long time. So, Mauricio, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. I'm originally from Chicago. I was born and raised in a little village. Went to high school on the southwest side, Bogan High School. Went off to U of I in Urbana-Champaign, majored in history and Spanish, and then decided to stay down there for law school.
Why'd you decide to be a lawyer?
As mentioned, I majored in history and Spanish, and my thing is history. I'm very passionate about it. Okay. But I explored the career options for historians, and it wasn't for me, you know. I PhD, we're talking about 4-6 years after, of more schooling after college. And
then, I guess that's one thing, that maybe everybody should really understand is that to go to law school, you don't need a specific undergraduate degree, right?
That's correct.
It's I know people who are music majors. I know people, nurses, police officers. Yeah. It's really, I suppose, if you have your undergrad, you're not happy with it, and you think you might want to explore, it might be an area to explore, I suppose.
Right. And that's just what I did. I wasn't liking the historian track, and I started exploring law. I took a couple of undergrad law courses that were taught by law professors, and then did like a pre-law program, and that pre-law program kind of confirmed to me that law was where I wanted to go. Okay. And well, here we are.
Yeah, family law. So why family? It's very difficult. I mean, I obviously I don't practice in that area, but I've done some pro bono work. I had one case where it was basically a fight between a grandma and a mom in terms of who was going to keep the kids, and it was terrible, dealing with that because people are so. Yeah, I guess in this area, I mean, there's a lot of emotion. It's very hard to be, to kind of be clear-headed when you're dealing with family. I think we say stuff to family that we would never dream of saying to coworkers or other people, right? But that just in a really high level of animosity and kind of. Just a very difficult situation. So I don't know how you deal with that.
Well, when I was delving into law in law school, we take a broad array of different courses. I was attracted to the classes where we saw the dramatic. So I took like all the criminal law classes, the family law course, they make movies out of these things,
Law and Order.
So so that's what I was attracted to. And that's why I practice family law and, among other things, criminal law. It was just the good, dramatic, interesting stuff.
Interesting. Okay. So I guess growing up, you did you have access to lawyers? Did you know other lawyers?
No,
or, okay,
no,
so you
no.
didn't know what you were getting
Yeah,
into.
in a little village, it's kind of the gateway community for immigrants and a very working class neighborhood.
Where your parents from? Are they from?
My parents are from Mexico.
Okay.
My dad was about 19 years old when he came to the U.S. My mom was younger, about 10.
Okay.
But yeah, so that's. I mean, we just didn't have too much access or exposure to professionals, when we were growing up, except for like maybe our teachers.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, obviously, we're in a kind of unique situation. We're recording this kind of as the states all start to open up after the COVID pandemic. Are you seeing kind of an uptick in divorce? I know that's been kind of in the media. There's been some stories, or that relationships are breaking down, or
Yeah.
this thing of everybody kind of being stuck together all the time.
We haven't quite seen the uptick.
Okay.
Probably on the contrary, it's been a little slower than usual.
Yeah.
We are starting to see, just like in the last week, more phone calls coming in. But definitely not more than we would see under normal circumstances.
Yeah, that makes sense. One thing that I'm always kind of curious about is, when somebody calls you up, how do you, I guess I want to say screen them, or how do you know, like, hey, this is just somebody I do not want to work with? Do you have that kind of like, is it like a spider sense or
Absolutely. So, I mean, ideally the consultation is gonna happen in my office. I want to see the person.
Mm-hmm.
And well, like you mentioned, family law is it's very emotional.
Yeah.
And sometimes it can bring out the worst in people, And well, luckily, I'm my own boss. So if I don't like something, if I don't like the person or, his facts, I'm not going to take the case.
So facts, when you say the facts, it's kind of, you say, hey, describe to me what's going on, what you're trying to do, and then they'll.
Right. And sometimes, I have the party or the person that is getting the brunt of the other person's unreasonableness.
Okay.
And to them, I'm going to, assure them that I'm going to try to do the best I can to stop the other person's shenanigans.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes you get stuck with the person that is the unreasonable one,
Okay.
And I do my best to tell them, hey, look, that's not the right approach to what we're trying to do. This is the right approach.
Yeah.
And if that person is just not listening and he's not taking your advice,
Mm-hmm.
and essentially you can't control him and his expectations,
Yeah.
then I don't want the case, because he's not going to be happy.
Yeah.
No
matter what the outcome.
Right. So,
Yeah.
and sometimes I can see that in the first consultation.
Mm.
And I'll just say, hey, look, I can't help you out, but here's the number of a colleague that maybe can.
Okay.
Sometimes, I don't catch it at the consultation level, and it'll pop up when, the case has already started. And again, I try my best to reel the client in.
Yeah.
And if we can't, then I just end up withdrawing from the case.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. So on the I guess on the flip side of that, if you were to go out and try to find a family, say you're not in Illinois, so you don't have kind of your normal network, or you're in California or Texas or somewhere else, if you were to try to find a family, family law lawyer, what are the things you would look for? What are the questions you would ask? What are you trying to get to understand to see if they're going to be a good lawyer for you?
I think the best way to find a lawyer, and I think this is true for any area, is speak to individuals that have been through the process. So if I'm trying to look for a divorce lawyer, a family law lawyer, try to find someone that got divorced in the area where you're at, and see and see who they used, and if they were happy,
Okay.
That's probably the best way. And in terms of, for example, business, for our business, usually when we get a referral from another client, they hire us right away. So they have that confidence, coming in that you're the right person.
So somebody's put in a good word, I
exactly.
suppose. Yeah.
It counts for a lot. So I honestly think that's the best way.
Okay. And what are the questions you would ask if you're trying to hire a family lawyer?
So I suppose some of the questions that I would ask is, well, how long have you been practicing family law for?
Okay.
What is your approach in handling certain kind of cases? After exposing my situation to the attorney, tell them, hey, look, how would you handle this?
What's the game plan?
What's the game plan? And see if you like what you hear.
Yeah.
Clients have different personalities, some clients like the attorney that is going to go to court and put on the big dramatic show and yell and, and sometimes you get that feeling from the client,
Yeah.
and I when I feel that that's what they want, I tell them, that's not me. That's not how I work. That's not what works best in court. But if you really want the show boater, then I go to someone else.
Here's the card.
But I think that's probably the best approach to that. Well, some of the things that I would ask, look, this is my situation. How are we going to handle this?
Okay. So we started out a little bit on divorce, and I feel like when I think family law, I think divorce. Always divorce. Yeah. But maybe what other things come up in this area? Aside from divorce, which we'll get into a little bit later.
So the other situation where you would need a family law attorney is you're not married, but you have a child with someone else.
Okay.
And you were, cohabiting, you were together, but now you're not. You guys broke up.
Okay.
And you have children, and we have to resolve all the issues regarding the children. So we're talking about, who's going to be responsible for making decisions of significance, of importance, for the child's life. Where is the child going to live on a regular basis?
Okay.
The parent that doesn't live with the child, when is that parent going to be able to see the child?
Yeah.
Child support. So that's the other situation where you're going to want, or you're going to need a family law attorney.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So earlier we talked a little bit about kind of the difficulty of working in this area in terms of the high emotional, issues that people are kind of bringing to the table when they're dealing with this, but whether it's custody, whether it's divorce, how do you, I guess, communicate with your client in a way that tries to get them to be more, to kind of lower some of that kind of emotional intensity when they're making decisions.
Yeah. Empathy, you first empathize and you listen to them. Sometimes the consultations kind of becomes like I feel like I'm a psychologist sometimes, and I just listen, and I let them vent, I let them vent. Once the venting is done, I tell them, hey, this is what we're going to do. This is what we need to do, and most of the time they listen, most of the time they listen. Sometimes they don't, and that's just their personality. But most of the time they're receptive to the advice that I give them.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, that's why you hire a lawyer to kind of get through the legal stuff, right? Okay, yeah. This is the paperwork that needs to be filed, kind of the technical stuff that needs to happen. But really, kind of more importantly, it's the experience that you bring to the table. You say, I've seen this thing a bunch of times.
Exactly.
Here's how it's going to play out.
Precisely.
I mean, that's kind of the most value I think a lawyer can bring in, is just kind of, we've been through this. This is how it's going to play out. We understand what you're trying to do. Okay, let's find a way to do that, but understanding that this is likely the outcome.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Yeah.
Okay, so let's get into the divorce piece. So let's say somebody's thinking about getting a divorce. Like, what's the, you've kind of made up your mind, this is it, it's just not going to work. I'm just trying to think of what's like the first thing, or what are the things you need to think about.
Okay. Yeah. So the things you need to think about first, if you have children, is where are the children gonna live on a regular basis? Are they gonna go with mom, or are they gonna stay with dad? And then you're gonna. So that's just again, who's gonna be the primary residential parent, if you will.
And what is that? So that's going to be. Well, I guess I'm trying to think. Is that something you work out with the others? You try to work out with the other spouse before?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I mean, if you can,
yeah.
If you're on talking terms, sure, that helps. Communication helps a lot. If you and your spouse can be civil enough and have a conversation about these things, it'll be better for you in the long run.
Going to kind of figure out what you
exactly.
want to do.
Exactly. Right, So again, if you have children, figure out where they're going to be living on a regular basis. When is the other party going to get to see the children? That includes holidays and then vacation time.
So you do that all kind of you should be thinking about that all kind of right off the bat.
It will, yeah. And when you go in to see your attorney, if you already know, if you already thought about this, it's going to help a lot,
Interesting. And if you can't, then...
Well, I'm going to tell you to do it, and you're going to think about it, and then you're going to come back to me and tell me what your thoughts are, Okay. So the other issue with children is before it used to be called custody. The legislature changed it not too long ago, and now it's simply who's going to be responsible for making significant decisions for your children.
Okay.
And those are four. It's health, education, religion, and extracurricular activities. Okay. So although the child is going to maybe be primarily living with someone, both parties have rights as to decision making. Mm-hmm. And what we usually try to push is for them to be able to decide jointly, So it's time for a child to enroll in high school. We'll come together and let's figure out where a child is going to go to high school, There are certain situations where it just won't work, Okay. And in that situation where maybe one of the parents will have to be the sole decision maker.
Okay.
And there are certain situations where you could split the decision making, maybe mom will be responsible for education and health, and dad would be responsible for religion and extracurricular activities.
Interesting. Okay.
So that's something that you can do, and something that you need to think about when you decide, okay, this divorce is going to happen. Or when
what about like aside from kids, like the house?
Yeah. So then, and I spoke about the kids first because that's what the court usually likes to. They wanna give attention to the children first.
Makes sense.
And then, but yes, absolutely. You then want to also think about assets. Mm-hmm. Everything that you made during the marriage, it's no matter who brought it to the table, it mm-hmm. really belongs to both of you.
Okay.
And that's also true for debt, Mm-hmm. So when it's time to split up, the assets and the debt need to be equitably split,
Okay.
fairly split.
That makes sense.
So if you have a house, what's going to happen to the house? Do I want to stay here? Can I afford to keep it? Right. Pension plans, I have a pension plan. She has a pension plan. Is it possible that we just each keep ours? Or, she doesn't have a pension plan. Am I going to have to give her, half of it?
That's big money. That's one area where I do sometimes do work in a little bit. And that's, I mean,
Right. Yeah.
That's usually, you got your house and you got your retirement plan, mm-hmm. which is the other area where you have a lot of assets.
And then, you have car. Usually cars are not a big deal, but usually the big assets are the homes and the retirement accounts.
And do you see situations where people are trying to hide away or squirrel away?
It happens. It happens. And family law is not like criminal law where... For example, in criminal law, you have the right to remain silent. Well, that's just not the case in civil law, in family law. If you have $20,000, under the mattress that, your spouse doesn't know about, you need to tell us that, because if not, if the court finds out, you're going to get in trouble,
Okay. What kind of trouble can you get in for?
Well, I mean, they get sanctioned you. They're going to take it from you more than likely. Yeah. Maybe if you incurred additional attorney fees because you had to go through the extra hassle of finding this money and getting it, maybe they'll award you some attorney's fees for that. But I mean, and you're just going to lose so much credibility in front of the court, and it's just you don't want to lose your credibility with the court and with your attorney. Right. And that's something that when I have a consultation and they decide to hire me, that's I tell them straight up, it's in my contract. We have to be ethical about this. That means disclosing all your assets, all the money. Yeah, well, she doesn't know about that. And well, it's my money. She didn't earn it. It doesn't matter. You have to tell us about it, and they have to know about it. And that's just it, Yeah. And if they tell me, well, no, that's not going to happen, and I can't represent you. And that's it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. And so what's the default? Is it like 50-50, or how does that... Is there a default?
So there's nothing in the statutes that say, okay, it's a 50-50 split. The split has to be just. It has to be fair, equitable, Okay. Sometimes it's 50-50, but it doesn't necessarily have to be 50-50. I can think of, for example, a situation where maybe husband during the marriage suffered a work injury, and he got, I don't know, $100,000 in a workers' comp, settlement. Well, the court is going to take into account that money is, it's going to take account the injury, that maybe because of the injury, this person will no longer be able to work as long as he would have, but for the injury, or maybe he'll need it for treatment later on. So that, for example, won't be a 50-50 split. I mean, the other party's going to get their taste, don't get me wrong, but it's not going to be a 50-50 split, Yeah. There are certain situations where, again, maybe both husband and wife work, and they each have pension plans that are about the same, or IRAs or 401ks with about the same amount of money. Then maybe they just each keep their retirement benefits, and that'll be the end of that. But it frequently is the situation where maybe wife didn't work, she was stay at home taking care of the kids, taking care of the home. Husband has a pension, you're gonna have to give up half the pension. That's just the way it is. And with the home too, if you can't decide who's gonna keep it, or maybe if the parties can't afford to keep it, then maybe you're just going to have to sell it and you split the proceeds 50-50. So, sometimes it is 50-50, but there's other situations where it's not 50-50.
Does it matter if someone is at fault? This is one my wife asked me. If someone is cheating, for example, and they cause the divorce, does that make a difference in the split of assets? Or?
No, not in the split of assets. Okay. We're on a no fault state. As a matter of fact, a couple of years ago, the legislature did away with all the different bases for getting a divorce. Before, you had adultery and mental cruelty and desertion.
So you had to show that in order to
You would have to prove that in order to get a divorce.
Oh, interesting.
But there's always been irreconcilable differences on the books too. And that's just simply, we're just not getting along anymore and this is over. Yeah. And that's all you need to prove. Okay. And all the other grounds got taken away. And now you just get a divorce based on irreconcilable differences. This is not working anymore, and one of you guys wants out, and that's all you need to prove. Okay. And no, it doesn't affect the split of assets.
Okay, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
What about staying in the house? Should somebody? Oftentimes once you make that decision, somebody leaves the house, somebody stays in the house. Does it make a difference whether you stay or you leave the house in terms of whether you get to keep it or
No, it doesn't make a difference either. I mean, that's gonna somehow at the end of the day that situation is gonna get resolved equitably. Again, you won't lose any rights because you choose to leave. I mean, it's difficult to live with a person that you're no longer comfortable living with, especially if the other person is extremely difficult and they're just making your life impossible.
Yeah.
Then there's really no need for you to stay. And if you want to go to live with a relative or just go out and rent an apartment, that's fine.
So it doesn't mean you're going to lose the house if you say, hey, I'm going to go.
Exactly. I would say that if there are children involved and you want the children to at the end of the day live with you primarily, if you're going to leave the house, take the kids with you. Because if you leave them behind, it's much more difficult to get them back, if you will.
Oh, interesting.
So yeah, that would be probably the only caveat.
Okay, interesting. So I guess one thing I'm always curious. It seems like the mom always gets the kids. Is that kind of a default, or?
No,
Okay.
no, the mom doesn't
some lawyers
always.
that advertise like dad's rights and stuff like
Yeah, I think it happens a lot just naturally because I think, mothers just tend to be more nurturing, and they're the ones. Kid gets sick, maybe she's the one that, especially in more traditional households.
That makes sense. I mean, I would.
Yeah.
I would
go with mom.
Go with mom. Yeah.
They're the ones that you're sick at night. Maybe she's the
me.
one that nurses you, the one that takes you to school, deals with the doctors, deals with the teacher. So sometimes I think that just naturally there's a more of a connection or relationship with moms, and then when the time comes to split up, they end up going with mom. But that's not always the case. Yeah. I can think of situations where, for example, mom cheated on dad and the kids create a lot of resentment towards mom, and they don't want anything to do with mom and they want to stay with dad. They end up staying with dad. And one of the things that I started noticing like in more recent years with younger professional parties that are getting a divorce and that have kids is they're doing like almost a 50-50 split where they're like 1 week with dad, 1 week with mom, or maybe 3 days with dad and then a couple of more days with mom, and then where it's almost equal, you know. And that's kind of the trend that we're seeing. And well, if that's what works for them, perfect. Nobody is gonna tell you no.
Court's gonna say fine.
Yeah,
that works. Okay,
yeah.
As long as you're
it'll work if you live nearby.
Yeah.
But if you live too far apart, it probably won't work.
That makes sense. One thing that I always hear is that divorces take forever. I don't know if that's always the case. I don't know if there's any truth to that, or it just depends on how. I'm sure it depends on how much people fight over every little thing, as opposed to kind of coming to agreement. And I assume it depends on how much you got too, right? I mean, if you don't have anything,
right?
Then...
That's exactly right. Obviously, the more issues that need to be resolved, the longer it might take, especially if you can't come to an agreement as to how are you going to do things. So issues with children can take a very long time if you don't have an agreement, because if you don't have an agreement from the get-go, then you're going to have to go to mediation, and mediation will take a couple of months maybe if you use the county program, or even if you it could be faster if you use private mediators. But then if the mediation doesn't work, then maybe you're in a situation where you need to get the kids their own attorney.
Yeah. So what's that? Can you just briefly talk, what's a mediation? It's not court?
So mediation, here in Cook County, it's paid by the county, and it's just an alternative for you guys to sit down and talk about the issue with mediators through several sessions.
And the mediator makes decisions? Or?
No, they try to work with you to come to an agreement as to how you should deal with your children.
They'll point out, hey,
right?
This,
Yeah. So they'll negotiate with both parties and talk and hear them out, and what the other party wants and what you want and
Okay.
try to work something out,
Okay.
And if that doesn't, and usually it works, but there's a lot of situations where it won't work, and
Yeah.
maybe you need to get an attorney for the kids, so that will prolong the case a lot. Assets, if you have a lot of assets, if you have a lot of accounts, we need to figure out what we're talking about. So if you have a lot of accounts, we need to issue subpoenas, and the bank need to send us back those subpoenas. So we'll ask for like a couple of years of bank statements. Same with credit card statements.
Oh, okay.
If you have a lot of houses and we really need to figure out what's the worth of the houses, then we need to get them appraised. And so that can take a very long time, if you have all these issues,
Yeah.
A situation that I just described where you have all the child issues and all these properties, bank accounts and the such, and maybe you also need to value pension, your pensions, a year and a half, 2 years maybe. So it could be very drawn out, and especially if you can't come to an agreement, that's going to take
just
longer.
On top of all that work that just needs to be done. Okay.
But, if it's, maybe you didn't have any kids and you just have a house, that's going to be simpler, and it'll get done a lot quicker.
Okay. So that makes sense. I mean, I guess the more complicated, the longer it's going to be. If you're broke and don't have anything, it should be fairly...
Right. That's exactly right.
I feel like one area that there's a lot of misconceptions, or people just, I guess, outrage without necessarily even understanding how it works, is alimony. I feel like there's a lot of people that say, oh, this is crazy. But I mean, how does that work? Is it crazy, or is it? I mean,
well, I mean, first I'll start off by saying that it's no longer called alimony. It's been years, and I've been practicing 14, 15 years maybe, and since I started practicing, it's called maintenance. So
maintenance.
That's what
at least
we
in
call
Illinois.
it. At least in Illinois, we call it maintenance. Okay. Correct. So what that is, it's your spouse paying you money, for your support, different from child support. And recently there were changes in the laws as to how maintenance is calculated. So now it's based on the length of the marriage. So the longer you've been married, the longer you will have to pay maintenance. And then it's based on your incomes, So if husband made a lot more than wife, or wife was at home, then there's going to be there's going to be a high maintenance payment. Maybe wife, she had a decent job, and so she made good money, maybe not as much as husband. So the maintenance is not going to be as high. And maybe there's a situation where it's about equal and there is no maintenance, Okay. And then you have those clients that are proud and they just don't want anything from the spouse. And they're like, I don't care. Even, if it's my right to get maintenance, I don't want it. And that's fine too.
Because then you got to go and collect, and, there's more...
Yeah, I mean, it's not too difficult. Usually, they just withdraw it from your paycheck, and
but it's basically if you have where you're going to see income, it is you have a big difference between the two. Okay,
and it's just this, and again, some of the older clients that I have that I guess more traditional, they sometimes have a hard time with the idea of maintenance, because it's like, why should she get money? She was staying at home, I was the one working, but they kind of don't understand that being at home is a lot of work, taking care of the home, taking care of the children. Sometimes they have difficulty with that.
Well, you're thinking like, hey, you could go get a job, right? And if you go get a job, then
exactly,
then why should I still continue to pay that?
Right.
Or if I don't know how it works if you get remarried or something like that.
So that's another situation. So for example, you'll have maybe a spouse that cheated, and like, well, why should she get it? It's not fair. And she has her boyfriend. Why doesn't the boyfriend support her?
God, I could see that would be.
Well, so long as maintenance, you get maintenance. Obviously, if under the statute, because of the difference in income, you're entitled to it. You get it so long as you don't remarry or you don't cohabit. So you could have a boyfriend and still collect maintenance, and that just it bothers a lot of people.
I can imagine.
But that's just the way it is, you know.
Okay. And then the duration of it, that's interesting. So if you're married for 20 years, you're going to be paying
for a lot of years.
Yeah. And if you're married for like a year or two, then it'll be short.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. One area that I think there's a lot of frustration out there about is the child support. And once even though the court says, hey, you've got X amount of child support, that it's incredibly difficult to collect. And I feel like I know a lot of people who just say, screw it, I'm not going to bother with it because this person is just not, they're not going to pay, and they're going to be playing games, and they're going to try to change it all the time, and they're going to change jobs, and they're going to do all these things to kind of impede the ability, to collect that child support, which is intended to, support the kid. It's very, obviously it's very important, for the children.
Right.
I'm just curious as to what your thoughts are in terms of that kind of situation.
Well, I mean, I think it could be a hassle. It can be a hassle. But I think the mechanisms are there. Obviously, if you get a child support order and the person is not paying child support, you have to take them back to court. And yes, we understand that that's going to take time away from your work or just your normal life.
Well, you got to pay the lawyer too, right?
That's frustration. You're going to have to pay the lawyer, but I mean, maybe you can get that money back. If there's no good reason for why the dad wasn't paying his child support, you can petition the court for fees, and they'll take care of the fees. And it is a hassle, but I think the mechanisms are there. Obviously, if at the end of the day, dad is just completely ignoring his obligation to pay, the judge is going to issue a warrant for his arrest, and eventually he'll get arrested, and in order for him to bail out of jail, he's going to have to pay a large sum of money. And
the child support, or just the bail?
Part of it's going to be based on the child support amount that you owe.
Okay.
And that's going to go to mom, and there's other situations too. For example, the Secretary of State can,
or dad, I guess, right?
What's that?
I said or dad, I guess.
Yeah.
Mostly mom, probably.
That's true. But for example, the Secretary of State can suspend your driving privileges if you don't pay your child support.
Yeah.
The IRS can garnish your return in order to take care of child support.
That's interesting. Is that a separate process that you would hire a lawyer to do for you, or to set that up?
We usually see it so you can actually deal with child support cases administratively separate from the court,
like through the state, or
through the state, right?
Okay.
It's through HFS, Health and Family Services. You can apply for child support. This is you could be married, or you you simply had a significant other that you're no longer with him, and through the HFS you can or through the state you can try to collect child support. And they're very good about it. And again, this is where you see people getting their driver's licenses suspended. They put in the orders to garnish your child support when your tax return comes in, and they can even prohibit you from getting like a passport. So it's work, and you have to be diligent about it. But I think
the license seems a little counterproductive. I don't know. It's something important, but it seems like if it's going to impede your ability to go work, then.
But because sometimes they do need it to go to work, it'll ring a bell in their head, and it's like, okay, I need to take care of this. And
but you can lock them up. I guess it sounds like if you're.
Well, true, because if they get pulled over, well, maybe not here in Chicago, but like outside in the collar counties, you get pulled over for driving on a suspended license, regardless of what the basis for the suspension is. They're gonna lock you up, and it's just a headache that you don't need. And one way you can avoid that is by paying your child support on time.
Take care of your kids.
Take care of your kids.
Which makes a lot of sense, right? I mean, that's what we're all supposed to be doing. So one thing I forgot to ask. So I guess I always hear of divorce settlements.
Mm-hmm.
A settlement is kind of when you agree, okay, this is what it's going to be. Is there like an alternative to settlement? Can you go to trial and the court will ultimately make the decision, or will the court not make a decision in terms of kind of settle?
As with any other area of law, most of your family law cases are going to settle.
Yeah.
I think that's the goal. Yeah. It's you try to minimize your client's expenses. Family law cases can be get very, very expensive.
Yeah.
So I think you have an ethical obligation to minimize those expenses for your client and to minimize litigation.
Yeah.
Again, based on your expertise, you're the lawyer, you know what's going to happen. You make your recommendations, and a lot of times it works, a lot of times it doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
But usually when you start a case, you figure out what the issues are, and you start talking to the other side, to the other person's attorney, and you start negotiating where's the common ground. After you have a very good idea of what's on the table, what the issues are, again, whether it be the children or assets or debt, or all of the above, and you can't come to an agreement, you're usually going to have what's called a settlement conference with the judge,
Okay.
And at this conference, the attorneys give their position as to how they believe the case should be resolved, who should get what. And then the judge is going to listen, and the judge is going to give his or her recommendations as to how they should settle the case. And I think, and those are extremely, extremely helpful. And I think most of the time we end up settling after that conference.
Mm-hmm.
Because the judge knows the issues, and if you don't take the recommendations of the judge, which you don't have to, then the next step is then trial,
Okay.
But again, it's like what the judge is going to do.
Well, the judge has already told you what
exactly.
the judge is
so
thinking,
what's the purpose,
Yeah.
But sometimes you have that client where it might not be your client, it might be the other person where they just don't want to accept the recommendation of the judge. And, you tell your client, this is what the judge recommended. You shouldn't take anything less, like why it's not worth it,
Yeah.
And then you just have to set it for trial, Or
and
sometimes
the trial is before the judge. It's not like a jury trial, or can it be a jury trial?
No, it's going to be before the judge.
Okay.
It's going to be before the judge. The judge is going to listen to all the evidence. Your clients are going to have to testify, and then you're going to have to submit evidence into court by way of exhibits, and then the judge is going to decide what it's going to be.
Here's who's going to get the kids. Here's who's going to get this.
Exactly.
Who's that? Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, like as mentioned, as with any other area of law, most family law cases end up settling.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it sounds like, I mean, obviously if you're going to go in to negotiate on all these points, you need a lawyer, right? I mean, I guess if you have a very simple, no assets, and you both agree to what you're going to do, maybe you can get by without a lawyer. But it sounds like this is something that I think would be very difficult for somebody to kind of do on their own.
Yeah, it's complicated. Even the simple divorces can be complicated. Because you need to know how to prepare the documents and all these things. But I mean, certainly when you have children, and certainly when you have assets, you should get an attorney.
Yeah.
You're just way better off. And you try doing it yourself, you're gonna regret it. I mean, and after the judge enters the judgment and divorces you under whatever terms you drafted up on your own, you have a very short limited of time to undo that. It's about 30 days, and after those 30 days, it gets very, very difficult to undo what happened.
Oh, interesting.
So if the documents weren't drafted up, or if you guys didn't bring all the issues to the table, and then later on, you start dealing with the ramifications of not having dealt with the issues up front, it can turn into a nightmare, and it's not a situation that you want to be in. So, and yeah, there's simplified divorces. Maybe, all you have is a joint checking account, or maybe you don't even have that. Maybe it's a situation where you just each have your own checking account, and yeah, I mean, maybe you can do it by yourself. But again, like once you have children involved and you have more assets involved, you definitely want to have counsel.
Okay, that makes sense. So at the beginning of the podcast, we talked about, kind of the intro that we do. We talk about, that laws can change. That if people think laws are unfair or don't make sense, that they should, do something about it. Mm-hmm. So if having been a practitioner in this for a while, is there something that you think like, hey, if I could change the way this is done, that would really be kind of a better way to do it, or is there anything like that? I know.
Again, I mentioned that there were a lot of changes that occurred in family law lately, like within the last 5 years. It's changed a lot, and I think it took care of a lot of the problems. It's not perfect, but it took care of a lot of the problems that we're dealing with. A lot, for example, before we would see a lot of inconsistency in maintenance, where there was no guidance as to how to calculate the maintenance, and judges were just, I don't know where they would pull numbers out of, and they were just,
so that's maybe
so
where
much.
People are like, hey, what
exactly.
This doesn't make any sense.
That changed, and now they take into consideration the length of the marriage and the difference in income, and even then, since that first change came into being, after that, like every year we've been seeing like tweaks, so I think things are improving.
And those changes come about, is it like the lawyer saying, hey, this doesn't make sense, or is it just, do you have a sense of?
Yeah, it's driven by the courts. It's driven by the lawyers. The Illinois State Bar Association.
Okay.
They have these committees, and it's just not the ISBA. It's different organizations that get involved and that are that deal with all these issues, and they speak to the legislatures, and then there's meetings and hearings, and eventually you get a change in the law, but that's I think the driving force behind that, it's going to be the attorneys, and it's going to be the judges.
But it's ultimately the state legislature that makes
but it's your representatives that
so that's
right,
those are the people that are
the people that you elect
accountable to the voters.
Yeah, exactly. Sense. The people you elect will have the final say, and then the governor.
Jody, any questions?
I did have a thought. Going back to custody, how much does a judge take into consideration the children's point of view on who they should stay? I remember, I'm a child of divorce, and I think I was about 8 or 9 when my parents got divorced, and I remember sitting and talking with, I don't know if it was lawyer, mediator, or whatever it was, but them very kind of directly asking, like, who do you want to stay with? What are your thoughts? Also trying to like dig in and get information, I think, about the parents. So I guess I ask is like, how much of a role do children's input on where they want to stay or parent do you feel like judges take into consideration?
Yeah, it certainly does count, the child's opinion. There's no set age as to when that's going to happen. I think you have to take into account the maturity of the child. Obviously, if you have like maybe a 4 or 5 year old, sure, they're going to talk to maybe a mediator or an attorney that's appointed to represent the child. But they're going to be very careful with his or her opinion. Sure. You're 5, you're very gullible. Maybe you might be told what to say, type of situation. But then as they grow older, they become more mature, and if the mediators and if you have a child representative or a guardian that's in charge of representing your child, if they feel that they're very mature and they're expressing the right reasons why they want to stay with someone, the judges will certainly listen to that. And obviously, the older you get, I guess the input that the child gives it's going to count for more, so long as there's just no, I guess, unreasonable reason behind the child's. You could have a high schooler, and maybe it's this high schooler that is maybe like lazy and doesn't want to do anything, or doesn't want to go with dad because dad is the one that's gonna make them do chores and give them structure, and with mom doesn't tell them anything. The judges are gonna look past that too, and that's where I think you have to be careful as to what the child's wants are.
Sure. And then, like, when it comes to custody, does one parent moves out of the house but wants custody, and maybe if that parent gets custody, now all of a sudden the child is going to a different school and is in a different environment. Does taking a child who has been in the same neighborhood home for the last decade play a significant role in a custody hearing where dad moved to the other side of the town and now all of a sudden we're...
Yeah. Judges like stability for children. That's what I've noticed.
Sure.
If you see a kid that is, he's doing well where he's at in terms of school, there are no issues, they're not going to be very likely to uproot him from that environment and just throw him into a new environment, and that's going to be especially true if the child doesn't want to go, you know. And so, these big moves can be intimidating for a child,
Sure.
You're I don't know, 5th, 6th grader, and all of a sudden you have to go to a new school or something like that.
Right.
It's hard. So judges are not gonna won't tend to uproot where they see that the child is stable and he's safe and he has a good environment.
Sure. Great. I think those are all my questions.
All right. Well, I think that wraps us up. But Mauricio, thank you so much for sharing your insights today. Jody, thank you for your work. If someone wants to get a hold of you, Mauricio, what's the best way for them to do it? Can you speak into the...
Sure. You guys can call my office, 312-492-8188. That's just the best way to schedule a consultation with me.
And your office is in Chicago?
It's in Chicago, 853 North Ashland.
Wonderful.
Yes.
Do you have a website?
We do, TinajeroMorales.com.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to the Isn't That Legal podcast. Please be sure to follow us or subscribe on YouTube, iTunes, or anywhere else that you listen to podcasts. If you have any questions or areas of the law that you would like us to explore, you can email us at itlpodcast@outlook.com. Remember, laws can change. If there's something that you think is unfair, you should do something about it. Thanks again for listening.